thank you everybody for attending today. My name is Jason Crosbie. I lead the account management team hireEZ, and over the course of the last few years, I've become somewhat of an engagement coach here. So love talking about it. Hopefully my passion will come through during today's conversation. You'll hear us talk a lot about the different ways that we can kind of make small differences, change things up a little bit that'll make a big impact for everybody. Okay. Skip over that slide. You're going to hear me talk a lot about this gentleman here. His name is Christopher Voss. He's a former FBI hostage crisis negotiator. And his team, hostage negotiators, over his tenure, had a 94% success rate. If you can imagine, his clients were some of the most dangerous people on the planet. Robbers, kidnappers, terrorists, complete psychopaths. And his team was very, very successful with them. The methods of communication, the style, the tactics, their ideas were tried and true, tested in real life matters, situations that really matter, life and death situations, and they work. And not only did they work there, they work really well in everyday life. They work really well with recruiters talking to candidates, and even vice versa. So we're going to share a lot of the ideas from his organization. He owns a company called the Black Swan Group. He's written a book. He's got a master class. You can find him. He's probably got a YouTube channel, and he's all over social media. But over the years, since I've been kind of watching and learning from him, I feel like a lot of his concepts and again, methods of communication work pretty well. They work better than anything else I've ever seen in this industry. And I've been in this industry for about 12 years now. Hopefully in the chat, I know I saw some comments earlier, but if you haven't had a chance to check out Chris Voss, the Black Swan Group, give him a shout. And again, if anybody has any comments, just throw them right in the chat. Kunwar and Amy will help kind of manage that conversation as we go, okay? So what everybody's wanting to learn today, right? The number one question, how are you going to help? Okay. First impressions are really hard to make. They're hard to make in person. They're even harder to make, more difficult to make over email, right? And candidates talking to recruiters, it's hard to make a first impression, especially if email is your first point of contact. I know Amy's going to throw up a poll for us, right? How long do we get to make a good first impression? Looks like some people know this one, got some of the answers right. We'll give it another minute before I jump in. But again, first impressions, we all have the same amount of time to make it, and it's not a lot of time. I can say the wrong way to make a first impression is to talk about yourself or how great you are or what you've done or your experiences. If I read everybody my resume on today's call, you'd be thoroughly unimpressed, I'm sure, right? All right, it looks like the poll's up, and it looks like a few people got it. First impressions, we get 7 seconds, believe it or not. That's it. It doesn't give us a lot of time, again, to kind of land, and it's really, really hard to do over email too. So first impressions for email, a lot of times that's going to be a subject line. So we'll talk a little bit about that when we get down into the messaging. The first kind of part of this, we'll talk a lot about some concepts and methods of communication, and then we'll show you towards the end how we incorporate that into an email campaign here. Okay. I told you what doesn't make a good first impression, right? Just reading your resume, telling people how great you are. That's never going to resonate. What does make a good first impression is when you can establish 2 things: trust and competency, right? The best way to kind of establish trust and competency in a very short time or a new situation is if you can lay out what the other side is up against. If you can talk about what's going on in the market, what a candidate might be up against, what happened previously the last time they went through this process, what's going on in the economy or what's going on in the market, that will land a lot well than telling them specifically, you know, your tenure or your experience or your educational background. Showing them what they might see in the market or what they might be up against or what they ran into previously really helps establish your trust and competency very, very quickly. Again, really hard to do through email and through 7 seconds. But once we kind of lay out what people are up against, they get that feeling of, well, yeah, that's right. You do see it the way I see it. Or, you know, you must be doing this a long time because you just laid out exactly what happened to me the last time I went through this process. So Establishing trust and competency are your first goals and the best way to make a good first impression, whether that's through email, whether that's through texting, social media, whether it's over a phone conversation or an in-person meeting. So strive for trust and competency as quickly as you can, and think about, um, how are you going to answer? How are you going to help the person, your counterpart there? And again, at the end, after you lay it out, you're really looking for that. Well, yeah, that's right. You do get it. That's what we're looking for in first impressions. I have last impressions on this page here, and we're going to come back to this towards the end of today's presentations. So I'm just going to kind of leave it out there that the last impression is the lasting impression. So always end on a good note, right? We'll get a little bit more into both of these things as we kind of go through some of the messaging components and some actual templates later on, okay? Kunwar, Amy, any questions? How are we doing on pace?
Pace is going good. No questions in so far. Again, the chat is fully open. Even if you just have comments or you agree or you have your own thoughts about this, feel free to share them and we'll communicate it over to Jason. So going great
All
so
right,
far.
thanks, Kunwar. So we talked about impressions, right? Now we're going to talk about some tactics. So these come directly from Chris Voss himself and his book and his company. They're called labels and mirrors, and they're great ways to help your counterparts open up. They're great ways to learn more about what you're up against or what they're up against so you can collaborate. And believe it or not, a lot of times with recruiters and candidates, it's more and more marketing. It's more and more sales are being incorporated into kind of how do we woo successful candidates over to our side? How do we tell candidates that are already successful, already working about our opportunities? How do we message people and communicate a little bit differently than what they've had before? So labels and mirrors are a great way to do that. Labels are phrases that start with it seems like, it sounds like, it feels like, it looks like. When we label scenarios or what we think candidates have experienced in the market, what we're really doing is either reinforcing a positive or we're diffusing a negative. A lot of times for recruiters and candidates, it's diffusing a lot of negatives, right? So good labels will help people get past things faster, right? So for negative situations, labels are great at helping candidates get past any type of negative preconceptions that they may have or may have experienced previously. So a few labels in our industry would say something like, it feels like this is a really hectic time for you. It looks like, you haven't had to update your resume in forever. It seems like you just might not be ready to look at a new opportunity, right? We've labeled all of the negative. We know you're busy. We know you're working. We know you have a family. We know you haven't had to update your resume or you're not applying to jobs because you don't have an updated resume or time to update it. Labeling those types of things will really help open up conversations. It'll help candidates get back to you or feel more comfortable to respond to you if they know, I don't need do I have to update my resume before I can talk to you? Do I have to submit a 20-minute, um, application process just in order to have a conversation with people? Again, for the past decade, I feel like the talent acquisition industry, applicant tracking systems, the more technology we incorporated in here, sometimes it slowed things down quite a bit. For years, candidates had an updated resume, a cover sheet. They supplied references. They were willing to spend, 20 minutes applying to a job ad or to an applicant tracking system career site and submit all of this information in wonderful detail about themselves. Today, they're not willing to do that, at least not until they have a conversation and know more about the opportunity and feel like it's a good fit for them. So we kind of have to message them differently. Gone are the days where we can just say, hey, you're great. Here's a link to my job ad. Let me know. They just don't do it anymore, especially if they can't do it from a button on their phone, right? So labels are a great way to kind of help outline or identify negative situations that candidates may have experienced previously. Believe it or not, that will improve your response rates. It'll also help you establish that trust and competency we're looking for in the first impression. Okay. Mirrors. Mirrors are a little bit tricky. Can't really use them in writing, but they're great in conversations. So a mirror is simply repeating the last few words someone said, right? Say it with an inquisitive tone. And mirrors will help they're an invitation for candidates or your counterpart to expand more on what they're saying, right? So if Kunwar had said something to me along the lines of, hey Jay, I can't apply to this job ad. I don't have a resume. A good mirror to that would be something like, you don't have a resume, right? Say it with an inquisitive tone. Well, yeah, it's not that I don't have a resume, just I don't have an updated resume, so I don't want to send this one in, right? We've invited Kunwar to tell us a little bit more about why he doesn't have a resume or why he doesn't want to apply. So mirrors work great. Always say them with a smile and be curious. Labels and mirrors will help you get additional information from your counterparts during conversations. All right, I'm going to kind of keep moving on here. The next kind of tactic that gets better response rates, that gets more improvements are no-oriented questions. So everybody by the end of this call will be able to pull up an email or pull up their last campaign or look in their inbox and see all of the questions that have been emailed to you about why that require a yes. I need to get into your calendar. What time can we connect next week? Would you like to learn more about this? All of those are yes questions. When we ask questions where we want the answer to be yes, it's hard to get a true, well, yeah, that sounds great. I really want to meet with you. Most of the time we get a counterfeit yes, or, the Black Swan Group would say there's 3 types of yeses out there: counterfeit, confirmation, and commitment yeses. And none of them really mean yes. They're all ways to get us out of the way or get us off the phone faster or get out of their way. Okay. When we change the way we ask questions, it's tricky. It's hard to get used to. But when we want the answer to be no, people are more willing to write back no. They're more comfortable telling you no. And because of that, they're more willing to respond and open up to you. When someone feels like they can say no to you without hurting your feelings, they'll be more willing to share. So no-oriented questions are a way to move things along quicker. If you ask your questions or can rework your questions so the correct answer is no, you'll get a better response rate, right? Again, the reason no-oriented questions work, yes is a commitment. People don't like to give commitments to complete strangers when they don't know all the details. They don't know what they're getting themselves into. A lot of times, if you do get a yes in that situation, it's just a way to it's a way to get you off the phone or out of their way. So there's some no-oriented questions here, right? Is now a bad time to talk? No, it's not a bad time. If it is a bad time, they're more likely to say, well, yeah, it is a bad time, but I can do tomorrow. Okay. Instead of asking, do you agree? Again, that requires a yes. We could say, do you disagree? A lot of times it's easy to say, well, no, I guess I don't disagree with that, right? The one on the bottom right here, have you given up on? I'll show you how we add that into a campaign later on. I've never seen more responses to those 7 words, or those words in a campaign in all my time doing this. It doesn't work on the first message, but on the last message to any campaign, have you given up on this opportunity? Have you given up on this role? Have you given up on this organization? Have you given up on me? It's a way for candidates or people to respond. You say, well, no, I don't give up. Right? No, not many people are willing to write back, yeah, I give up. So they don't. They normally write back, well, no, I don't give up. I can't do it right now, or I'm not ready, or it's a bad time. So no-oriented questions will get you a better response rate than yes questions, right? No questions are also great for if you feel like you've been ghosted before, right? At some point, everybody's probably been ghosted on this call, whether it's at work or personal lives. A no-oriented question will kind of help get people back to the table, right? There's really only 2 reasons why people stop communicating with us. right? They feel like we're not listening to them. And by the way, we're terrible listeners. People in general, not good at listening. Um, People listening to this conversation right now, you're probably already thinking about your responses or where I could go wrong or how I'm going to get tricked up, right? People just aren't good at listening in general. Um, so people will give up on us or feel like they don't need to respond to us anymore if they feel like they haven't been heard. The second reason people will kind of give up on you is if they've lost influence on their side. Like, oh, I thought this was going to be a great idea and I couldn't wait to move forward. But guess what? My counterparts here aren't going to go for it and we're not going to do it. And they don't have the heart to tell you. And so, again, it's easier to ghost you than to say, no, this didn't work. I'm not going to be moving forward with you. People don't want to hurt your feelings, they don't want to ruin your day. So, no oriented questions are a great way to get them back to the table. Kunwar, I saw the little chat moving up and down. Anything that we should speak to?
Yeah, I just posed a question to the chat. I said, does anyone disagree that Jason is sharing great insights? Just wanted to make sure I was also practicing my no-oriented questions. We got an LOL from John, who said he's never been ghosted before. Kind of find that hard to believe, John. I'm sure we all have. And then one from T. Williams. He said he liked the no-oriented questions, or they said they liked the no-oriented questions. Yeah, John, I knew that was sarcastic. No worries.
Oh,
Definitely positive responses from the chat. Everyone's enjoying the content.
let's keep going, Jim. Let's talk a little bit about what gets the best results today when we kind of write out some engagements here, right? On our platform on hireEZ, we're going to be engaging with a lot of the candidates that we find here through an email campaign. I would love to say, now, platform's great, find 100 people, send them a message, and you're going to get a great response. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work that way anymore, right? We see our best results on this platform with a 5-step sequence, but volume makes a big, big difference in this, right? Email can sometimes be a number game. If there's anybody on from sales or from marketing, we can't just send one notification. We have to have a multi-threaded approach. We have to try email. We have to try phone. We have to try text. We have to try social. We have to do a little bit of everything. I like to think our platform could be that email connection for you, help you run a campaign. And again, the best campaigns on our platform, they start with 100 candidates minimum 100 candidates, right? If I'm going to take the time to write out 5 touch points, I need to make sure that there's enough candidates in there that it's going to be impactful. Again, can't just find 13 candidates, send them 1 or 2 messages and hope that's going to be enough to fill requisites today. It just doesn't work this way anymore. So 100 candidates minimum per campaign and 5 touch points per sequence. Not only do recruiters, most of the recruiters I work with, do they not get excited when I tell them they have to write out 5 touch points? When I tell them we want those touch points completed in less than 10 days, they throw up their hands and really start to throw a tantrum, right? I can't send that many touch points in that short of a period. I'm going to start upsetting people, or we're going to start, we don't want people to think that we're too pushy, or we don't want to come across desperate. Normally, I would say if those are the types of responses that we're getting, or those are the feelings we're getting from the messages we're writing up, we're not doing a good job with our messages. If you're getting a lot of replies that are, how did you find me? Unsubscribe, don't ever contact me again, we probably didn't do a good job writing our first few touch points. The number one trait, the number one feeling I want to put into my touch points, and it's hard to do, it's empathy. Empathy is the number one feeling, emotion, vibe we want to try to incorporate into our messaging, as long as we also need to make it authentic too. We can use technology to our benefit. We can use AI to write touch points for us, but we still have to make sure that they're authentic. We want people's creativity and personality to come through, not only on a phone conversation or over a video like we're doing today, but even through their writing. Again, it takes a little bit of time. It's hard to get good at. But once you start incorporating these types of concepts into your messaging, your response rate's going to go through the roof. You're going to sound like different than all of the other messages and recruiters out there. And that's the idea, right? It's small changes to make a big difference here. So I talked a little bit about our platform here, right? 100 candidates minimum, 5 sequences or 5 touch points per sequence. The good news about this is touch points on our platform that are successful are really short. It's okay to be direct. Candidates over the years have told us they don't want pages and the entire history and the entire job description in the touch points. They want to quickly be able to look at your message, get a quick glimpse of, all right, does this sound like something I'm good at or I'd be interested in? Do I think that this is going to be worth my response? Remember, it's got to be how you got to be answering that question. How are you going to help them? So short touch points that are direct. If you got a template you've used on other platforms, you want to bring it over here, great, let's do that. But let's make sure we break it up into smaller, digestible segments. And then we're going to improve the results by sending it out in a specific sequence. And we're going to automate it for you so you don't have to manually do that. Kunwa, the chat
Yes.
looked like it was blowing up a little bit there. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, you're ahead of me. So we actually got 3 or 4 questions that came in. The first one you might have answered with the frequency part, but Aaron, who asked the question, feel free to let me know if there's something that he was still missing. What she was basically asking was, can you talk about sort of the when in a campaign a little bit more about that timing piece? If you think that there's more you can talk about based on what else is, maybe if you want to emphasize something on the frequency list or just about sort of that timing piece.
Yeah. So the idea here is we're going to use technology and volume to our advantage, right? If we're going to take the time to source and find qualified candidates, people that we want to engage with, right? We want to make it easy and turn that. We're going to send 100 single emails out into a couple more clicks, and we can now send 500 emails or up to 500 emails out and really expand on that volume, right? So instead of just messaging 100 people once, message those same 100 people up to 5 times. And again, a lot of this is automated. As soon as they reply, they're taken out of the sequence, so you don't have to worry about you know, bombarding people that have already responded. Again, we use technology to our advantage here. The when part, right? In my personal opinion, and there's some statistics here to back it up, I feel like 5 messages completed in less than 10 days. That means we're sending a message every day or every other day, right? Depending on when you start your sequence, will impact the rest of the sequence. So personally, I try to avoid messaging on Fridays and Saturdays. It's not the end of the world if one goes out on a Friday or Saturday. On our platform, we see like it's a percentage point difference. In my mind, though, people aren't always in the best frame of mind to think about work or respond to work on Fridays and Saturdays. It's just not top of mind for them. A good campaign, though, like a good 1-2 combo, send a message on a Sunday evening and then a follow up on a Monday morning. It's like a 1-2 punch, right? A lot of people, Sunday evenings, they're starting to wind down and they're starting to think about what's coming up next for the week. It's a good time where they check their email and they are somewhat responsive. Again, another quick reminder, Monday morning, they'll start to recognize your name, your email, your brand, your opportunity. Those things make a difference. Even if we're not getting a response on the first or second touch point, it's starting to plant seeds. They're starting to get to know who you are. They're starting to think about, maybe I should start looking at something else or consider something else. So Sunday night, Monday morning, maybe we give them Tuesday, give them a day off, pick them up again on a Wednesday afternoon, follow that up on a Thursday, maybe one more message on the following Monday, something like that. That's 5 touch points completed in less than 10 days. Again, there's no perfect time. We need to use volume. That's why we'd like to see a minimum of 100 candidates. The whole trick to making a successful connection is sending the right message to the right person at the right time. It's the whole trick. Problem with the trick is we don't know who the right person is or what the right message is or what the perfect time is. That's why volume makes a big difference for us, especially through email.
Yeah, Jason, that was great. We actually had another question come in regarding what you said earlier about the importance of empathy, right? So Vicky asked, can you provide sort of an example or maybe a reference point of how you've been able to add empathy into outreach? If this is something that's coming up later in your presentation, we can also wait. But
We can start with it now. I'm sure
sure.
it'll come up a little bit later too. A great way to introduce empathy into your conversations. I know I talked a little bit about labels previously. Labels are a great way to sound empathetic, right? Feels like this is a really hectic time for you. It seems like you're really busy at the end of the month. this is probably the worst time for me to be reaching out to you. That can become across as an empathetic message, because what we're doing is we're kind of identifying what they're up against, right? Empathy is different than sympathy, right? The difference is empathy. We just have to acknowledge what they're up against. We don't have to believe it. We again, candidates, people in general, they want to feel like they've been heard. Empathy helps that. Again, if you can identify what they're up against, they'll start to feel like, oh yeah, you get it. So again, empathy doesn't necessarily mean we believe everything that they feel or everything that they're up against, or it just really means that we can acknowledge that they got things going on. So labels are a great way to introduce empathy, and another great way to introduce it is to use what we call email softeners. So everybody's probably heard, people will read your email with the worst possible tone they can think of. So we need to make some small adjustments in our messaging to change that tone. And one way to do that is incorporating softeners. Softeners are the words or phrases, I'm sorry, or I'm afraid. Those phrases don't make you seem weak. They make you seem human, genuine, sincere, empathetic, right? I know I'll get into this a little bit later, but if maybe my third or fourth touch point, I start to feel like I'm getting repetitive, I'll mix it up a little bit and I'll incorporate some softeners like, I'm sorry to reach out to you again, Kumar. I'm afraid if we don't connect soon, you're going to miss out on this opportunity. So I've just incorporated a couple of softeners, the I'm sorry, I'm afraid. I've acknowledged that, hey, I know you ignored my first 3 messages. I'm messaging again, probably driving you nuts. And then I'm introducing what we would call loss aversion, or my younger audience would be more familiar with fear of missing out, right? That, hey, Kumar, I'm afraid if we don't connect soon, you're going to miss out. It's a very compelling reason for a candidate or somebody to respond to you. People don't like to feel like they're missing out, even if they don't know what they're missing.
Yeah, 100%. And we actually had 2 more questions come in, but I realized because I've had an early look at the presentation, you're going to be addressing it throughout. So Cole, Liz, I definitely see your questions. And if Jason doesn't address it at certain parts of the presentation, I'll bring it up to him to make sure he does. But I think your questions will be answered as he moves forward.
All right. So volume, touch points, and frequency play a big impact in email, right? In email connection. Again, sending the right message to the right person at the right time. We need to make sure we give ourselves a lot of at-bats, forgive the baseball analogy. As I talk about what looks good or what's a successful campaign, right? So I talked a little bit about we're going to start with 100 candidates in our pipeline, right? If we're going to send these 100 candidates up to 5 touch points, again, not everybody gets excited to write 5 touch points, but I'll say, if you take the time now to slow things down and write out your touch points, it will speed up the connections later. So slow down now to speed up later. Take the time to write out your 5 touch points ahead of time. And then once you do have these 100 candidates, it becomes 500 emails really, really quickly. And I use some very general numbers here, right? So if I'm going to find and engage 100 candidates, I'm going to send up to 500 emails. If I get the 70% open rate, that's pretty much the average across our platform. That means 350 opened emails, right? If I could get a 10% reply rate, and for me, that's kind of the floor. That's the bare minimum for a campaign, right? If I'm going to take the time to find 100 people, and I'm going to take the time to write and manage 5 touch points, I need to get a good response rate. 10% is the bare minimum that I want to get for my efforts here. So I just went with the bare minimum. We don't want to oversell and underdeliver, but a 10% reply rate to 350 open emails is 35 replies, okay? If I'll kind of shed light on the dirty little secret here at hireEZ. We can track open emails and we can track replies. We cannot track if they're positive or negative replies, right? I know not every message we send and get a response for is going to be, this sounds great, please hire me, right? We know there's going to be a lot of no thank you, not interested, not right now. But if we could get a 30% positive reply on these 35, that means we're going to get about 10 qualified and interested candidates. I feel like, or for us, feels like 10 qualified and interested candidates is probably enough to get some offers out or even make a hire. If anybody has some different metrics or ideas that they'd like to share, please, like I said, feel free to put it in the chat. Overall, this is what good looks like with hireEZ. Kunwar, anything we should address before moving on?
Of course, I'm muted. I do this once a meeting. I did want to add, Cole did have a question earlier, and I think it pretty much relates to this slide. For this volume of outreach, what is the volume of requisitions you're looking to fill? I imagine so far these are just benchmark data in terms of you don't necessarily have how many requisitions so far. It's more so what gets you to one hire, I imagine, but I'll let you clarify that a little bit more.
For our platform, for the users that I get to work with on a daily basis here, we like to think about each requisite gets its own campaign, right? So it's kind of a 1-to-1 ratio for us. So if you have one opportunity, we'd like to see one campaign like this. Again, this is just what good looks like. And by the way, you can't always find 100 qualified candidates, right? There's some really tough roles out there, some really hard markets right now. We get that. In general, though, we want to try to find as close to 100 or get up over that century mark whenever we can for projects, because in email connections, volume makes a big difference for us.
That's great. And Julia actually had a question which is related to sort of the volume part, right? Like we've talked about the importance of personalizing messaging and all of those sort of examples you're giving from a mindset standpoint and strategy for how you're improving your emails. And she was wondering, like, how do you implement that in a bulk fashion? Are you using templates for your bulk emails? Like, how are you including that personalization when you're doing sort of the volume piece?
Oh, fantastic question. At hireEZ, we have 3 different ways to kind of incorporate that, right? So if you want to start a project here, a few different ways to do it. You can just use our platform and our filters and type in your own job description, your location, mandatory skills, some cool filters, tech filters or healthcare filters, what DE&I filters, whatever you're really looking for, be more specific, and just build out a search manually, right? It's a semantic search here. It's not Boolean. You can use Boolean. I'm not a Boolean master though. Our platform's, again, semantic, just like typing into Google. So type up your own search and we'll provide candidates for you. The second thing you can do is import a job description. This is where it gets really cool. We introduced some GPT logic into our platform earlier this year. So when we import a job description, our platform will parse out all of the key components from that job description, build you a search. You can qualify your candidates, the candidates you decide to engage with. Since our platform, our AI has parsed out your job description, it can also write your first 3 touch points for you. Again, pretty cool. We'll show you that a little bit later. The third and final way that we really can kind of build a search is using an ideal candidate, right? When I work with recruiters and hiring managers, anytime somebody says, the platform didn't work or we couldn't find enough people, send me 2 things. I need to see the job description and I need to see a candidate that is successfully doing this job now or in the past. And we can build a search based off of that candidate's profile. So 3 different ways to kind of find people using our platform. Once we find and identify or qualify the candidates we want to move forward with, we can kind of engage with them as well. Did that answer that?
Just to clarify, Jason, it's more so she was asking from, that was good insight for the search part of it, but from an engagement standpoint, when you're doing sort of those bulk emails, right? Like you're engaging 100 candidates, how do you suggest sort of making sure you're keeping intact that personalization piece when you're messaging so many people, right? Like
we incorporate a lot of variables. So you can use candidate first name, you can use job title, you can use candidate reference a company that they may have worked for in the past. Incorporating variables like that and personalizing each step in bulk makes a big impact on how the message comes across for candidates. So again, we're using technology, we're using variables to personalize each individual touch point.
Awesome. And I'm sure like in your case, you've seen with specific industries or specific roles, you're also able to personalize it and make templates for your specific industry or your specific role that can be a little bit more hyper personalized, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Well, Julia, awesome question. Let me just see if I have anything else come in. Do. Christopher, so I know you're asking about sort of hireEZ's GPT functionality. So that is going to be coming up a little late in the presentation. So I will hold off on that question, but I definitely see it and we'll bring it up if it's not addressed. Lacey just added a general comment. Where do you find 100 qualified candidates? Question mark. I get yelled at for spamming people.
So we want to avoid spamming by changing up our messaging, changing up our touch points, right? We don't want to bombard people on our platform. Again, as soon as somebody responds, they're automatically removed from the campaign unless you manually put them back in there. So it's hard to kind of change up messaging from what we're used to. We have to incorporate some of the ideas that we talked about earlier, like labels, like softeners, like loss aversion. Those things will help kind of change the way we message. We'll get into that now, I think, right? So those also kind of relate to content and formatting. So the first kind of engagement concept that we talked about was volume, touch points, and frequency. Now we're going to move into some content and formatting. So I mentioned earlier, not everybody gets excited when I tell them they got to write out 5 touch points. The good news is the short, direct touch points here work best. So if you have a template you're using somewhere else, bring it over here. We'll break it up into 5 smaller segments, right? The first bullet here, less than 6 sentences. So an email that's successful here, the most successful emails are less than 6 sentences. That does not give us a lot of real estate to work with. It does make us become very direct, very specific. And again, this is what candidates have told us is most successful. We didn't just make these up on our own. So if we only have 6 sentences to put in an email, we have some pleasantries in there, we have a closing in there, we have to be, this really forces us to be direct and point out why this candidate is good for this role or why this role is good for this candidate, right? I mentioned pleasantries a minute. In messaging today, gone are the days where you can write a message that starts off with, "Hi, Amy, I hope you had a good weekend." That message automatically gets ignored today. We just overused it, and candidates have picked up on it, and they're just non-responsive. They know if they get a message from an email address they don't recognize that starts off with "I hope," that they can ignore it, and they do, right? But pleasantries are important. We want them to know that you're genuine and human and sincere. So the best results is to put your pleasantries at the end of your messages today, right above your signature, right? Talked about being direct. Change I to you. This is probably the most important bullet here, honestly. This is what's going to help change the candidate experience. This is the Jedi mind trick that is going to help change the tone of the reader, of the recipient, right? The way that this works, anywhere that you write messages out, we want to change I to you. You can look in your inboxes right now or look in your outboxes, messages you've sent. You'll pick up on this everywhere now that we've pointed it out. And it's fantastic because it does help change the mind of the recipient here, the way it would work. I'm going to kind of give you 2 examples of the same message, same email, right? The first one will use I, the second one will use you, right? So if you've ever seen messages in the past, or you can probably look some of these up in your inbox right now. If I sent a message to Amy, "Hey, Amy, I'm a recruiter. I hope you had a good weekend. I think you'd be great at this role I'm working on. I've got some really great clients. I'm really good at this. I've been doing it for years. I need you to apply to my job ad here, or what day next week works best to connect." Right? That message is all about me and kind of the work that I did, right? "Hi, Amy, I hope you had a good weekend. I'm a recruiter. I found your profile. I think you're great. I need to talk to you." It's all about me. It's all I. What we want to do is change it to you and make it about the candidate. So kind of similar message here, right? "Hey, Amy, you're a great fit for this role we're working on. Your experience at past company or current job title makes you an ideal candidate. Would it be impossible to connect next week? By the way, I hope you had a great weekend." It's the same message. It's the same stuff. We just changed the I to you and I put the pleasantry at the end. Those types of messages are much more effective and they make a much better candidate experience. It does literally change the way people read emails when you change I to you, right? The other thing, we have a tendency of doing content and formatting. We think that we're putting in options for candidates in our messaging, right? Here's my calendar. Here's my job ad. Here's a link to my website. Here's a link to my profile. Here's my phone number. We keep putting a whole bunch of different ways for candidates to respond to us because we think it makes it easier for them. And what happens is candidates tend to get a little overwhelmed and unsure, and they don't know which one to respond to, and they end up not responding to any. I don't know which one is the best way for a candidate to respond or each candidate individually to respond. So it's good that they have a variety, but we just need to make sure that we only include one way to respond in each email. Only one call to action in each email. And you can pick what that is. A link to your calendar, a link to your job ad, a link to somewhere else. That'll hurt your response rates though, right? If we're asking candidates to go somewhere else other than reply to this email, it might not make as big of an impact on your response rates. Hopefully they'll, connect with you elsewhere or apply to that job ad that you need. Just make sure you have a way of tracking that or keeping an eye on it. You'll start to include some of these things and like, hey, my response rates didn't change. Jason was full of it. No, we just kind of put in a link to drive them somewhere else. So just be cautious of that one thing. But only one call to action in each touch point. Remember, we're going to be sending 5 touch points, so we can give them 5 different ones if we want. And candidates, you don't have to say, hey, I know you ignored my message last week. They'll be able to see your messages, at least on our platform. They'll know what's coming through in the thread. They'll know you reached out previously. If we only get 6 sentences, don't waste that space by saying, I know you didn't respond last week. Or they'll get to know that you're a recruiter. You don't have to tell them, right? They'll figure it out by the time they're done reading your message. Save that valuable space for important details. Be specific. What specifically makes this job a good fit for them or this opportunity a good fit for them? What specific skills did you pick up on their profile that made them a good fit for this? Tell them about it. If you can get them talking about themselves, they're more willing to open up to you. So the last step in each sentence. So each sequence. Not allowed to write campaigns for my clients. I can kind of write the last touch point though, and it's one simple sentence. It's 7 words. Have you given up on this opportunity? That one simple sentence works better than anything else I've ever seen in this industry. The reason why, it's a no-oriented question like we spoke about earlier, and people don't like to write back, yes, I give up. So they don't, right? Give yourself one last chance. Just make that the last touch point in any campaign that you do or multi-threaded purpose that you do. It can be used in texting. It can be used in social media. It only works if the candidate recognizes your opportunity or your brand or your job. You can absolutely spell out opportunity. Forgive my shorthand. I saw that one. So again, just one simple sentence. Have you given up on this opportunity? I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at the amount of responses you get to that. It probably won't all be positive. It won't all be, this is great, hire me, but you'll get a lot of conversations started and connections made with that one simple sentence about no and why they didn't give up or why they don't want to give up. No, I don't give up. I've just been busy. I don't have a resume. I just had a baby. Could be 1,000 things, but it's a connection started. All right, Kunal, the chat was going up and down. I only caught one of them.
Yeah, so we did have some questions come in, but I'm also cognizant of time and I want to make sure you're able to get through the presentation. So I think the majority of the questions that did come through that I saw are going to be answered throughout the presentation. There are 1 or 2 that I'm earmarking that I'll bring up just in case they're not addressed.
All right, so we talked a little bit about GPT earlier. When we import a job description, you can kind of see our platform takes information off of that job description and will incorporate it into the first 3 touch points. It's a great way to save time. I think in terms of time savings, it usually takes somebody about an hour to start from scratch to write a campaign. When we use the technology here, we can at least get 3 touch points going, and it gives you a good foundation. You can simply use the 3, You can edit them, you can kind of make them your own, or you can, like I said, just kind of build on what got started for you, and it'll save you literally hours. So is this a little Giphy going too quick for everybody? Can we follow along with this? What do you think?
Yeah, I think people are giving thumbs up, so looks good on that end.
So let's jump down and we're going to highlight the differences. This is probably not an effective touch point today, right? And hopefully the audience will start to see some of the things that we spoke about here, right? So our first impressions of subject line. Does this feel like a good impression, a good first impression? Hiring construction project manager in Florida. It seems pretty general. It seems kind of spammy to me. Feels like you could send this to, thousands of people. Maybe highlighting what type of construction or what part of Florida. Florida's a pretty big state. 25 million people here. Might want to kind of narrow that down a little bit, be a little bit more specific, make it unique to those individual candidates that want a message. So again, remember, our subject can sometimes be our first impression. Most of the messages seen today, I think the statistics are somewhere between 80 and 90% of emails today, they're first viewed from a phone. And if your pretty words and letters and pictures that you spent hours on and trying to type up, that fills up that mobile screen, most of the time people aren't going to be able to read it. Even if they do get through it all, they probably won't be able to retain it. That's why we got to keep our messages short. Even this one feels a bit long. I bet if I had a mobile device or pulled this up on my phone, it would fill up the whole thing. I'd never scroll down to the end of it, right? Pleasantries. As soon as they see that, I hope you had a good weekend. Skip it. Next. Change I to you. I'm a recruiter. I found your resume. I've made a bunch of placements. I think you're great. It's all about me and the work I did and why I need to connect with you. Make it about them. Be specific. If you can call out what makes them a good fit or why this opportunity is a good fit for me, tell them. Being direct and being specific will help you keep your messages shorter, and it helps you get to the point, which is what candidates have said they wanted. No oriented questions. Again, if this opportunity excites you, please reply to this with your updated resume. I'd love to discuss this role with you in further detail. I wish it were that easy. It's not. People aren't going to do these things. The last impression, right? Again, thank you for considering this as your next move. It's general, it's boring. Here's where we can get creative. Here's where we want your personality to come through. Come up with something unique and creative. Again, the last impression is the lasting impression. So have some fun with it. All right, so we've all seen what a bad message looks like, a bad template. Here I can kind of show you what a little bit of a good message looks like with some of the tactics that we discussed today, right? So here you can see job opportunity. I'm using a variable, putting in their first name. It's going to seem unique to them. Here's what you need to know. A subject line similar to this got like a 92% open rate on our platform. It worked really, really well. Again, another variable here to make these individual outreaches personal, right? Your profile, your background, your current title, your experience, right? We're looking for a little bit about the role, a little bit about the compensation. Would it hurt to learn more about this role? Yeah, probably wouldn't hurt. It's a no question. Oh, by the way, hope you had a great weekend, right? Here's our pleasantry at the end. This is how we incorporate some of these tactics into a campaign today. Touch point 2, send 2 days later. Again, first name, candidate company. No, we're opening with a no-oriented question. Does your current role offer the best, whatever you're looking for, best career path, best room for advancement, best compensation, best managers, best leadership, best in market? Make it whatever you want. But this is a no-oriented question. It gets people thinking, right? We're still very interested because you're awesome. Our organization's been great at this. And then, we do have a little polling question to make it easy for buttons on your phone. They can just click, yeah, I'm interested, no, I'm not, or contact me later. Again, unique closing, have some fun with it. Touch point 3, 3 days later. First name, another no-oriented question. Again, this probably sounds awkward. These take time to get used to and practice and get good at, but they're not bad. You know, would it be crazy to find out a little bit more about what you're worth in the open market? Most candidates probably are going to get a little curious. What am I worth out there? Is the grass really greener? Could I get more? Am I getting that promotion? Am I getting enough, opportunities left and right? Just have some fun with it. It's short, it's direct, it helps get responses. Fourth touch, we started to incorporate, if you guys can recall, it feels like, looks like, seems like, those were all labels. We start to add in some softeners. Sorry to reach out again. Afraid if we don't connect soon, you're gonna miss out. So some softeners, a little bit of that fear of missing out. Again, a no-oriented question. Would you be completely against a 7-minute call? Okay. I don't know if stay thirsty, my friends, professional work response, but again, just get creative and have some fun with it. Let your personality come out. Last touch point, first name. Have you given up on this? That's it. One last chance for them to connect with you. Again, right message, right time, right person. We never know what that is. Give yourself as many chances as you can. And if you're getting a lot of those unsubscribes, stop stalking me, no more, like, that means we didn't do a good job messaging in the first place. We got to rework them. And these all take practice. They're all unique. If we knew what would be the best template or the best campaign, we'd share it with everybody. They're all different. They all have to be a little bit unique, and we have to keep trying. These touch points might work great for one person and not as well for another, so we got to mix them up a little bit. But the only way to do it is if we start to try, we get these out there, we see what works best for our organizations, our opportunities. All right, Kunwa, I feel like I'm rushing through there.
No, you're totally good. You're getting a lot of, basically, this is very, very helpful. People are definitely interested in getting the recording. I know we do have a couple of more technical questions from Jessica and Jane. I see those in the chat. Jane, we'll make sure to get back to you guys on those sort of more technical things. Jane was asking about what do you think of emojis and GIFs in emails, and does hireEZ allow you to do that? Or that might be a quicker yes response if we do.
Yes, love them. Have fun with it. Try not to put in things that are going to get kind of hung up, like if it requires a ton of data, but a couple of little emojis, a couple of pictures, a little meme, I'm all for it. Anything that makes you seem genuine, sincere, shows your personality, as long as it's professional and your organization's okay with it, throw them in there. Have some fun.
And we did have a question about poll responses. So do those count as a reply, and are they available through reporting from Jessica?
They're definitely available through reporting, and yes, they do. Or I should probably double check that with Amy, but I think they do count as replies.
Yes.
They do count as replies, yes.
Thanks, Amy.
Cool. I know there was a few other questions that maybe I didn't touch, or did I touch on them?
I think you got through most of them. If anybody has a question that they asked before that I didn't get to, I know I was flagging a couple and just seeing if Jason was able to get through them. I want to say you got through pretty much the majority of them. Again, please let me know in the chat if someone has a question. Oh, Bonnie asked, do you ask for referrals? Bonnie, I'm assuming you mean within the emails themselves.
Yeah. I would ask them in kind of using a no-oriented question, though, right? Feels like this isn't the perfect role for you. Would you be against sharing some referrals? Right? Would you be completely opposed to pointing me in the right direction? Again, just makes you seem human, right? We can recognize our own faults. Labels kind of help, again, get people past those negative preconceptions.
100%. And I'm going to be dropping a link in the chat as well. Obviously, if you want to speak to Jason or anybody in our team about the specifics of what hireEZ offers, we're definitely more than open to having a conversation. So if anybody wants to click through that link, it's specific for this webinar. We did have one more question coming from Rita. Is going from 3 to 5 touch points automatically going to be on the hireEZ roadmap? Seems like a great strategy rather than adding those additional 2 manually.
So the AI is already changing. It's already learning. So the more you use the AI to kind of help write templates for you, and then you adjust those templates, the more the AI learns. So I can only imagine that that's the direction we're going on. But in terms of a specific release date of when it'll be changed from 3 to 5, I can't give you that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the question, Rita. Again, if there are any other questions that haven't been addressed, I know we packed a lot of great insights into this our discussion. And we really thank you for all your questions, your engagement. There's something that we haven't addressed. I've, again, dropped a link in the chat to book some time with our team to talk, whether you want to talk about the hireEZ platform or anything that was discussed today. Catherine, thank you for spotlighting that again. So we will make sure to send out this video recording to everyone. Great insights. If you want to connect with Jason on LinkedIn, I'm sure he'd be more than happy to talk through sort of everything else he's learned that he wasn't able to sort of encapsulate in this presentation. And the hireEZ team will definitely be in touch. Jason, I can't thank you enough for your time. I mean, this was an absolute pleasure, both getting to learn and put this presentation together and then, see everybody's response to it. So,
I had one more thing. I talked about
yeah, of
lasting
course.
impressions earlier on, right? So the reason I saved this for the end, the way our brains are wired, we can only remember two things from a conversation. We can only remember what was most intense or most impactful to us personally and how the meeting ended. So as today's session comes to a wrap, as the week ends, the weekend approaches, next week comes around, this is going to move from your short-term memory to your long-term memory. Unfortunately, you're only going to be able to remember two things from this session: whatever you thought was most impactful and how we ended. It's why we say the lasting impression is the last impression, always end on a good note. Everybody, thank you so much for your time today.